Internet. Hey, it's Eric Nevins. This is Eric Nevins Live, and I'm so glad that you are here. Whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or someplace else, Instagram, wherever, go make sure you hit us up on YouTube and like Eric Nevins Live. Would appreciate that. But I'm glad you're here. We have a really fascinating conversation with you today. We've had a great time just kind of starting out here. That little, sometimes podcasters talk about the little pre-show. It's my favorite part. So we've had a great time so far. I promise you this is going to be an excellent conversation. This is the show where we talk about ordinary humans doing extraordinary things. And today we're going to talk about one of the most extraordinary things you can do, but I'm not going to share that with you just yet. And we're going to introduce him here in just a minute. Friends, if you would, if you're watching wherever you're watching, hit that share button. That'd be awesome. And just let people know that we're out here. And again, I want to remind you, this show is all about a conversation. So I get to facilitate. We've got our guest. He's amazing. He's going to bring some amazing, cool stuff. And we've got you. And you're going to have some questions about the things that he says. Put that in the comments wherever you're watching this, and I'll be able to put it on screen, and you'll be part of the conversation as well. Okay. Now, in honor of our guest today, and we're going to add a new twist to the show, which I'm excited to do, a new segment, and it's this. And I want to hear from you in the comments wherever you are. So if you answer this, we're going to put it up and we'll hear it. So we're going to do question of the day. I need some music or something, like a little trumpet or something. I'll find that later, maybe. Here's the question I want to ask you guys. Okay. What's the best question you've ever been asked? Now, I've had people give me lots and lots of answers to this. But maybe you have a story. Maybe you have a moment when you were like, a question just hit you out of the blue. It hit you and you went, whoa, that was incredible. Maybe it changed your whole perspective. Maybe it changed your whole life. I've heard that story before as well. So if you have something, I know you have something, probably a question just popped to your mind, just toss that in the chat. And I would love to hear and share that moment with you, or have you share that with us, and we'll share it and we'll all talk about it here as well. Okay. I think that's enough of me droning on. We need to talk to our guest. Let's discuss this this subject. So here we go. Listen, I don't know if you've noticed, but we're kind of drowning in answers. I've been thinking about this a lot, right? We don't live in the industrial age. Where do we live? The information age. We live at a time when answers are plentiful. You want to know something? Do you remember? Maybe you're not as old as me, but if you remember back in the day, you'd play Trivial Pursuit with your friends and you'd be like, the only authority was the answer on the card because nobody could pull their phone out and Google it, right? Like it was a thing. Well, now we've got AI, we've got Google, we've got social media. You can get an answer to almost anything you want in seconds. It's all right there. Well, here's the real question, and I don't know who's asking this. Are we even asking the right questions? It's not many of us. Well, our guest today, he believes that the quality of your questions determine the quality of your life. I just love that. Your leadership and your relationships, of course, it applies to everything, right? So if that's true, most of us are settling for less than what's possible. He's the founder of Kairos Partnerships, an organization committed to serving hungry leaders through coaching, consulting, and speaking. So here's what we're going to talk about today. If you want to change the trajectory of your life, start by changing the questions you ask God, yourself, and others. Our guest is J.R. Briggs. J.R., welcome to the live. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thanks, Eric. It's great to be with you.
Thank you. This is an interesting subject to me. Now, I didn't mention it already, but let's do it right now. You've got a new book. It's coming out next week from when we're recording this, October 7th. It's called The Art of Asking Better Questions. I've got it right there. So friends, you can see it, get it in light there. And it's fascinating, really was challenging to me. Are you excited? Like it comes out, I saw a reel where you got the box and you unbox it. What were you feeling in that moment?
Well, I've written several books before, but this is my absolute passion project. And this is a book that I've been thinking about and researching for about 10 years. This was the subject of my dissertation of equipping leaders to ask better questions, and then writing on it for the last year and a half or 2 years. So all my projects are exciting and I believe in them and I'm thrilled. But this one is a special category for me. I mean, it's one of those, like, I feel like I can die now because it's been trapped in my bones and now it's out. So Yeah, and once it's out of my hands, though, it's no longer in my control. So it'll be interesting to see when this is out, how it impacts people. But I wrote it because I want it to change people, and so
Yeah.
that's the prayer in this, that people are changed by the message.
That's such an interesting moment for anybody who creates anything. That moment when you take a thing that's been in your head, you've been thinking about, and you put it together and you kind of put it out to the world, and you're like, okay, what's do people like it? Is it just me? Or so? Do you experience that?
I do, yeah, and I think I used to be very anxious about that, and I don't know if it's because I'm just at peace with it, or I'm getting older, or whatever. But to say I've done all I can do, I've taken it and stewarded it as well as I can, and where it goes from here, we'll see. But I do pray. I don't pray for numbers. I pray for stories. I pray that
Mm.
God would actually allow me to hear people who've been impacted by what I've written, and that it just finds the right hands and the right people that need to read it at the right time and what they need.
Oh, I love that. Okay, this might be the perfect time to ask this question. We'll see. But I noted, I read an article from you that you were like a pen pal mentor for Eugene Peterson mentored you as a pen pal, right? Kind of you wrote him
Yes.
letters. What did you ask him? And then does that have maybe what did he ask you? So there's probably several questions here. And then talk to me about some of the impact that that's had, maybe on this work, but definitely on your life.
Nobody has marked my ministry mindset more than Eugene Peterson. And through a series of unique circumstances, I used to work for the Navigators, publishing company called Nav Press. The Message Bible was published through Nav Press. And so I had an opportunity to serve as the MC of a message release thank you party for Eugene and his wife, Jan. And it was at that everyone was focused on the message. But I had read several of the other books that he'd written on pastoral leadership, and I knew I wanted to go into ministry. And so as a result of that, I just said, I've got so many questions and would love to ask you. And I thought he wasn't really paying attention. He was kind of grabbed a piece of paper and a pen and he was writing something down and he wasn't looking at me. And I thought I was boring him. I thought it was kind of strange he wasn't paying attention. He was actually writing his address down and he ripped it off on a piece of paper and handed it to me. And he said, anytime you write me, I promise you, I will always write you back. And I thought, all right, that's a dare. I'm going to take him up on this. And so I wrote Eugene a letter, and he wrote it to the day he died. He wrote me a letter back every single time. And it was like Christmas morning when I got a letter from
Wow.
Eugene Peterson. Sometimes it was questions if I had read a book of his, and I'd say, I got a question for you. When you told that story on page 46, can you expound on that? I'm not sure how that works in ministry today. Or it could be something in my personal life or something in my ministry context of saying, what would you do in a situation like this? And so he really mentored me. And sometimes he'd pick up the phone and call me just because it was easier for him to answer it over the phone. And one day he picked up the phone and he said, he had a really raspy voice. It sounds like he was a chain smoker, but he wasn't. He just had benign nodes on his vocal cord. So he sounded like this. So when he picked up the phone, he's JR. I said, hi, Eugene. He said, why don't you just come out? Jan and I would love to have you come out and spend a few days with us at our house in Montana. And so it was a wonderful treat to be able to go there. I offered to rent a car. He said, no, I'll pick you up at the airport. So he shows up in
Wow.
his jeans and his running shoes and his vest, and picked me up, grabbed my bag, threw it in the back of his Subaru, and drove to his house and enjoyed 3 days of eating and hiking and telling stories. And so he still marks my ministry. I miss him. He's been gone a handful of years, but I'm so grateful for his mark on my life.
Yeah, boy. There's a handful of people who I wish I would have got a chance to meet, and he's on that list,
Mm,
right? Like I just
mm.
never got the chance for whatever reason, never crossed paths. But that's kind of amazing. Okay, so what did you learn about questions from him?
Well, I'm not sure it was anything directly, but he modeled asking questions very well, and obviously he was always listening to the Spirit, and as many modern day saints do, they just have a different pace to them, and when you slow down, you're able to listen well. I think Eugene had a great ability to ask questions of himself, of what does it mean to be a person that represents God in the pulpit? What does it mean to be someone that represents God in someone's life, or when a marriage is falling apart, or um, when there's pain or suffering in someone's life? And he was always very good at listening. While he was a good question asker, he was a better listener. And
Mm.
there's a relationship between question asking and listening. I have met people who are great question askers and terrible listeners. And I've met people who are really good at listening, but they don't ask many questions. And I think it's an art to find that balance between being a good question asker and being a good listener. But that was Eugene's gift. He listened well to the Lord. He listened well to the scriptures. He listened well to his people. He listened well to his wife. He listened well to his own body. And I'm so grateful for the model that I picked up from him of what it means to have a listening posture. He just gave God a full-bodied yes with his life of listening.
Wow, I love that. Well, so that I this is just the perfect time to ask this question. I think, what is that relationship between listening and questions?
So it's as I mentioned, some people are great at one and not the other. And so being active and positive, you can be an active and negative listener and question asker, and that's not helpful. You can be passive and good, but to be passive, to be active and positive in terms of the questions we ask, that means that I go into a conversation expecting to play tennis or pickleball with someone. I ask a question, hit it over to your side of the net. I wait. I see if you want to engage and hit it back over to my side of the net. And we engage in conversation. Where it becomes a problem, Eric, is there's a term that not many people have heard of, but I came across in my research called boomer asking. It doesn't mean asking questions of boomers. It means just like a boomerang, I ask you a question, but I actually don't really want you to answer it. I'm just setting the table for me to answer it. And so a boomer ask might be something like, hey, Eric, what do you think about the fall? Actually, fall's my favorite, and October's my favorite season, and I love it. And all of a sudden, I realize you might realize if I'm boomer asking you, Jared really didn't want to know what I thought. He was just setting the table to ask me a question. And so we've got to be really careful to, if we're going to ask a good question, to actually shut up and let someone answer it.
Right.
And then when we answer it, to be able to ask a very simple follow-up question, just 3 words. What about you? Because sometimes you can get in a conversation where, especially if you're good at asking questions, which I know you are, is you can ask questions and people respond, and you ask another question and they respond. And you could go 45 minutes or an hour without anyone ever turning to you and saying, "What about you? What do you think?" And we have to remember the best conversations are those where it's like tennis or pickleball. We're hitting it back over the net to each other.
Yeah. It's fascinating. I find myself in both situations sometimes, right? So
Mhm.
there's times when I'm just happy to talk about myself and interpersonally, and I'm just talking, and people are asking me questions, and I like to do that. But I'm trying to get more aware of going, wait, okay, let me do that. What about you? Tell me about you. Where are you at? Or to ask a question about something I know, maybe that somebody's dealing with or that we've talked about before. But that can be tough to kind of do sometimes. I don't know. I
Mhm.
suppose there's lots of psychological reasons in that, but boy, it's definitely a skill. So that's good.
Yes. And it reminded me too, Eric, that there was research done by a guy named Charles Derber, and he's a sociologist at Boston University. And he studied thousands of conversations, and he was able to categorize people into one of two categories. The first one was what he called a shift response conversationalist, and the other is a support response conversationalist. A shift response would be where I might ask a question like, have you seen any good movies lately? And you respond with something saying, yeah, I watched a good drama the other night. A shift response would say, oh, I hate drama. I actually am more into documentaries. And so I shift the response off of you and onto myself. And my dad calls this stealing the ball while some other person is
Yeah.
dribbling it.
Right.
And when we shift the spotlight off of someone else and onto ourselves, it happens all the time in conversation. And he said, unfortunately, that's all too common. But the best listeners and the best question askers are those who are support response conversationalists. Where if I were to ask, have you seen any good movies lately? And you said, yeah, I saw a good drama. A shift or support response would be, what was that movie? And you say, well, oh, that's great. How did you get interested in that movie? How did you first find out about it? What did you love about it? Is there another movie you'd recommend based on that? I'm keeping the support on you, not on me. And it's amazing because once you think about shift response and support response, it's everywhere. It's kind of like the FedEx arrow. You know, that first time when you saw the FedEx arrow, you can't
Yeah.
unsee it now. Once you know about shift response and support response, now you can't unhear it because it's everywhere. And we need to be the kinds of people committed to being support response conversationalists, not shift responders, because shift responders, they're a dime a dozen. And the best people are illuminators, as David Brooks says. Illuminators are those that are support respondents.
Oh wow. Okay, so that's a great skill, friends. You've already learned something today. Like if that's the only thing you take from this conversation, it won't be. But if it is, that you are already getting what you paid for. So I love that. I want to go back a little bit further as well. I read an article where you had a conversation with Rachel Held Evans about the F word, failure. So she was good at her titles, right? Um,
Yeah.
and and it was so fascinating to me. First of all, so here we are again with another person who I wish I had met at some point in life. But um, you you talked about how easy it is for ministers to wear kind of a mask of success in that particular thing. And this was maybe some work that you did a while ago, but I thought it had some bearing on this conversation because I think this is definitely true in certainly church contexts that I've been in, where leaders wear a mask of success. But um, part of moving away from that is to ask questions. I think, right, to ask yourself some questions. What masks am I wearing? So, are there questions that leaders can ask themselves to kind of crack that mask?
Yeah, when it comes to failure, and yeah, the four-letter F word of fail is something that no one can avoid. It's all there in every person's life at some level, big or small, frequent or infrequent. And so, how do we wrestle with failure? And when we experience failure, we always ask ourselves questions. You know, what happened? What's wrong with me? What do I do with this? What do I learn from this? What's the invitation from Jesus? There can be mature questions and immature questions that we respond to. And so how do we wrestle with our masks? Yeah, there's all sorts of masks that we can wear. We can wear a humor mask, we can wear a success mask, we can wear a try harder mask, we can wear an intelligence mask. There's all sorts of masks that we can wear. And so I think one of the important questions we can ask ourselves is, who am I? Because so much of what drives masks is who we believe we are in our identity. And if we believe I am what I accomplish, I am what I own, I am what other people think I am, that often drives the kind of masks that we put on, that we reach for, or that we create. And so I think who am I is a big one. Where does my worth come from? What does the good life entail? These are just core questions of worldview in almost any religion in the world. But also, because I failed, now what? Is this fatal? Is this going to destroy me? Will this damage my reputation? How much should I care about my reputation? We all do, but to what level should we do it? And a big one is, what is my motive in reaching for this mask? What am I trying to hide or protect? And in fact, that question, what is my motive, might be one of the more diagnostic, effective, and quick diagnostic questions we can ask of ourselves before we even open our mouth to ask another question. What's my motive? Am I trying to zing somebody? Is it a gotcha question? Am I trying to sound intelligent? Am I trying to put a mask on to fake people out? Am I curious? Am I trying to show compassion and care for someone? But what is my motive is one of the most piercing questions we can ask before we open our mouths.
I love that. Sometimes I've asked, "What do I want here?" Right, which is kind of the
Yes.
same
Yes. What
situation,
do I
right?
want? Absolutely.
What am I trying to get? And that can be just really a clarifying question. To your point, yeah. Wow, I love that. See, these are the kind of things I love to have, and I'm gonna have to spend like an hour just reflecting and maybe do some journaling after this conversation. But that's good. But I love that. That was really interesting. I love that you did that work with failure, and you had created kind of I don't think you're doing it anymore. I couldn't find it, but like a
Mhm.
conference, a failure conference or something. That was kind of
Yeah,
interesting.
we called it the Epic Fail Pastors Conference. Um, because one of the things we noticed was that everybody, in terms of pastors' conferences, it was always people with a church of, 5,000 or more.
Yeah,
And it was everybody on the circuit. And doing research or realizing the average church in America is between 50 and 60 congregants total. And yet we only have these big names up here, these mega churches in America make up less than 1/2 of 1% of all
right,
churches in America. Yet we feature all these. So I said, where do we go for the ordinary conference, for the quote unquote failed pastors
right.
that have a lot to learn from, but they'll never be featured on, fastest growing churches in America. They'll never be, a New York Times bestseller author, but they have so much to offer. Where is that space? So I just wrote it as a bit of a joke on my blog 15 years ago or something, and said we should do an epic fail pastors conference. Within minutes, I was getting dozens of comments of people saying, "When is it? Where is it? Where do I sign up? What city is it?" And I said, "No, no, no. I was just kidding. I mean, this was just theoretical." And people said, "Why not? Well,
Why not?
why not? Let's host something like this." So again, a question is what spurred the
Yeah,
Epic Fail Pastors Conference of why not do it? This would be valuable. We were shocked when we had a couple hundred people show up from around the country, and including one gentleman who flew over from Australia. And I said, "You've never been to America. You want to fly over for this conference. Why?" And he said, "I can't find a safe person in my own city, let alone in my own province, to talk honestly and safely and courageously about failure in ministry. And so I figured if I have to go halfway across the world to find it, I'll do it." I thought, wow,
wow.
wow.
Doesn't that speak to this whole idea of loneliness? I think particularly my context has been church, but I've
Mhm,
heard to talk about the male loneliness epidemic, right? You hear
mhm,
people talk about
mhm,
stuff like that, but
mhm,
I think what we might mean there is we have a lack of vulnerability or safe places to be vulnerable.
mhm.
And
Yes.
yeah, and
Yeah.
sometimes
It,
go ahead.
well, I was just going to say, it's only when we're vulnerable that we grow. But pastors have learned to be a little bit careful because too much vulnerability in the pulpit, that sometimes they're punished for that. And in fact, sometimes congregants will come up and say, "Pastor, I know you're human. I imagine you struggle and probably yell at your kids and kick your dog from time to time, but I don't really want to know that." And what they're basically saying is,
Wow.
I want to live by the impression that you've got everything figured out, even though I know you don't, which is sad. And so we've got to wrestle with where can we allow our pastors to be humans? And unfortunately, I think some systems have created it that don't allow pastors to be humans.
Yeah. Yeah, because they're. I mean, they are. It's interesting too. One thing I've learned as I've done this kind of work, and I've had a chance to interview people that were just heroes to me, right? Like, so great example. I interviewed John Schlitt from Petra. Do you remember Petra? Like, he was
Oh
like, I
yeah,
just loved.
wow,
Oh my god,
going way back.
I'm a hairband guy, so but like it was so great, and he was great. It was so, but one thing I've learned is they're just people, right? Like even the amazing people that I talk to, they're just people, and they struggle, and they have issues, and you might not like them always. There's a reason they say don't meet your heroes. That not that one, but it can be like that sometimes, right?
Yeah,
And
sure.
that's just it. So okay, maybe there's a point here about loneliness. There's probably a point too about curiosity and how do we.
Mhm,
Sounds like to me a lot of church people don't they maybe they need a somebody who's like doing it really well so they can have something to
mm.
aspire to. I don't know, or maybe they just want to be blissfully ignorant. I'm not sure what that is, but a good question might actually help here.
Yes. I mean, actually, this is the reason we started Kairos Partnerships back in 2011. It was three questions, actually. Who pastors the pastor? Who
Yes.
shepherds the shepherd? Who leads the leader? We could even add in who helps the helper, because they're giving so much. But who's caring for them? As Henry Nouwen said, pastors need people who don't need them. And it's often hard for pastors to find spaces where they're not needed, where they can let their hair down. where they can pray rated R prayers like we see in the Psalms
Mm-hmm.
and not be punished for it. And so what does that look like for them? And so the goal was to create an organization that allows space for leaders to actually be led or not feel like they had to be on. And yeah, so it's sad, they say it's lonely at the top, and it is. And so, as one pastor told me, I have relationships, but I don't have relatability. I know a lot of people, but I'm not sure a lot of people can relate to what it's like to be in my role, and that can be difficult for a lot of pastors in
Right.
feeling that loneliness. Pastors aren't the only one; leaders of all kinds, and we work with Chick-fil-A operators and college presidents and entrepreneurs and Black Hawk helicopter operators and everybody in between, but they feel lonely too, and so that's sometimes hard to know where they can be themselves.
Wow. Yeah. Well, there's a reason they say it's lonely at the top, isn't there? Well, that's because that's what happens. Okay, friends, I want to just take a moment to remind you, make sure you go and follow us on YouTube at Eric Nevins Live. I appreciate it. And we're going to go back to our question of the day. What's the best question you've ever been asked? I don't care if you're watching now or later. Go ahead and put that in the chat. I want to feature you. I want to have you here. And if you put it in later, I will go ahead and answer that as well, or I'll respond to you. JR, how about you? What's the best question you've ever been asked?
Boy, that is a tough one. A lot of it depends on context.
Sure.
Everything from would you like to take the job to what is Jesus doing in your life right now, to how would you respond to that in a way of obedience, to do you want a free World Series ticket to the
That's a
Phillies
good
when
one.
they play the Astros? I mean, there's all sorts of great ones. It just depends on the context that we're in. We have two adopted sons, and so I think to have the adoption agency and the birth mothers of our sons say, "Will you adopt my son, my child?" I mean,
Wow.
that's pretty amazing. So those
Yeah.
are some significant ones that I can think of off the top of my head.
That stands out especially, right? That's a life-changing question right there.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely. And questions can be trivial all the way up to, yeah, life altering, eternity bending type questions. There's so much power that exists in a good question.
Yeah. I love that. Okay, I wanted to ask you, so the inverse of that question, without outing anybody, what was the worst question you've ever been asked?
Well, I'd say the category of worst questions are often ones that are demeaning,
Mm,
biting, hurtful. And so, I think there are a lot of counselors' couches that are filled with people that have been asked a very hurtful question and sometimes over a long period of time or sometimes once that has stayed with them and impacted them negatively. How could you be so stupid,
yeah.
or what's wrong with you, and you hear of adults that they grow up and always struggle with just chronic debilitating insecurities because all they heard as a kid was what's wrong with you.
Yes.
And so I would say that category again. Questions are they're like electricity, water, sex, fire. They're so powerful. It all depends on how you use them. They can be used for great joy and benefit, or it can cause death and incredible damage. And so we've got to be really careful with our questions. They can be life-giving, or they can be incredibly destructive over decades if we're not careful. So, we got to hold that power and steward that power very wisely and carefully.
Yeah. Yeah. So in middle school or high school, I had to memorize James 1. And what's one of the things he says there? The tongue is like a fire, right? Like
Yeah.
it can hurt, it can help, it can do both. Um, yeah. And you made me think about all of the, oh, let's see. I had a follow up to that, but yeah, definitely there's so much with that when we're trying to help other people, or not, and being mindful of it, for sure. I'm not sure. Do you find this a generational thing too? I find that there is. It feels like our society is a little more open to thinking about this than it may have been 50, 60 years ago. Do you find that?
Yes, that's very insightful. Yes, I think about my grandfather's generation. And not only is it generational, it also, there are some gender differences. There are even some geographical and cultural differences within the United States, and even some ethnic and international and cultural differences as well. So we've got to think about all those layers related to this because, yeah, generationally, it was children were to be seen but not heard, right? Then now we're seeing people really pay attention to and ask questions of of children. I'm very grateful that my father, when I was growing up, he and my mom too, but especially my father, would ask questions of my brother and I when we were younger, just driving around to the grocery store, running errands on Saturday, whatever it is, and he would really honestly want to know our opinion. And I know that my great great grandparents. That would not be the case. You would not ask your kids questions. So there is, you're right. There is a generational difference. Um, I live here in the Northeast in the Philadelphia area where questions are a bit more direct than maybe other parts of the country. In the
Yes.
South, I think people are willing to have conversations with you. In the Midwest, I went to college in the Midwest. I've spent a lot of time in the Midwest. I have extended family there. To ask questions, even curious questions with good intentions, feels like, it's like intrusive. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to share this with you. And so you've got to be careful and aware of the different um, uh, tension points and the cultural context. Even when it comes to a lot of Asian cultures, where it's hierarchical and it's honor based, that you have to be much more careful because it's less of a direct culture and it's more indirect in nature. And so because of that, questions can come across offensive in certain cultures. So we need to be aware of some of those ethnic, cultural, gender,
Yeah.
generational, and geographical regions and the context around it. So it takes a lot of wisdom.
It does. That's pretty interesting. Yeah, I learned that when I worked at a bank. I was telling you I worked at a bank, worked in a call center. So I talked to people from sometimes all over the world, but mostly around the United States. And yeah, my Easterners, right,
Yeah.
very direct. And it
Mhm.
took me a long time to, as a guy from the Midwest, not to take that personally, right? Like what's going
Yeah.
on? But once I realized, oh, they just want the answer is all they want. Like they don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care if it's a bad
Yep.
answer. They just want to know, like, you know, can I use my card or not? Whatever. And once I figured out that was the case, it made it a lot easier for me. It wasn't so hard. But yeah, I always find those cultural differences very, very fascinating. Okay, I want to ask you some
Mhm.
really specific um, and practical questions. Okay,
Mhm.
so
Sure.
one thing I was interested in is sometimes it's not always clear what a situation calls for. Like what kind of a
Mhm.
question a situation might call
Mhm.
for. It might be uncomfortable. It might be just something that where you're like, I don't know what to say right now because you're feeling some
Mhm.
emotions. How do you handle those kind
Mhm.
of situations?
It's great question. Let's back up a little bit because I think all good questions contain four factors, or you could call them pillars. So the first one is we always have to have curiosity. You can't ask a question unless you're curious, right? So there's curiosity. Number two is wisdom. You say, how would we know? We need a lot of wisdom to be able to know what question to ask, when, whom, what's my motive, sort through that. So there's curiosity, there's wisdom, but there's also humility. If I'm going to ask a question, I've got to admit I don't know something, right? I mean, inherently baked into a question is I don't know. And then fourth, we need courage because it takes a lot of courage to admit when you don't know something because our culture values intelligence and knowledge. And so if I ask a question, people may say, you don't know that? What's wrong with you? And so I think if we understand all four of those on a sort of bigger meta level there, that we've got to have curiosity, we've got to have wisdom, we have to have humility, and we have to have courage, then being aware of that, we can press into that to say, James 1:5, right? You talked about James 1 earlier. If any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God who gives generously and without finding fault, and he will do it. There are some people that say, I need to really press into that with some wisdom here on that. But one of the things I talk about in the book that I came up with in the research is that there are four levels of good questions. I think there are five levels of
Mm,
questions we could call level zero bad questions, like who do you think you are? What's wrong with you? But four really good questions. And level one, if you just think about level one, those are questions for information. Just simple facts. What time is it? What time does the show start? What's your name? You could ask a stranger that question and it wouldn't be awkward, right? And but level two is where you're going a little bit deeper. These are not just questions for information. This is questions for interaction. So this is where you'd ask about people's thoughts and emotions. So it requires a little bit of context and some trust there. So you might say, how are you feeling about today's meeting? Or when did you first become interested in kayaking? It's often in the realm of small talk, but it serves an important function in relationships with a little bit of context I need. I wouldn't just walk up to a stranger and say, when did you become interested in kayaking? It feels a little awkward. But level three is what I call questions for understanding, and that's feelings and desires that requires a more mutual trust and vulnerability and relational context that we need. We might talk about hopes and dreams and disappointments, but it requires some trust there. So it might be a question like, when do you feel most fully seen? Or what are you afraid to tell me right now? But then, sorry, that's level four. Level three would be things like, what do you really want in life? Or what are you afraid of? But level four, those questions of when do you feel most fully seen or when are you afraid to tell me? Those are questions for transformation that require ultimate vulnerability and intimacy. Why do I tell you all that? Because sometimes when people say, I don't know what to say or do, I say, let's think about the four levels of questions. And the best thing to do is just start with a level one question. And when there's enough trust there, you can move to a level two. And maybe if there's enough relationship there, you can move to a level three. Level four is a very small group of people. That could be your counselor, your spouse, a best friend, a pastor, a accountability partner.
Mhm.
But if you can think about the levels of questions, and sometimes I have people when I lead a workshop to say, let's generate a few. What could be a few questions that we could just think about in each of those three or four levels right now? And just helping people prime the pump a little bit can help them when they get in a conversation, go, I don't know what to ask. Then they say, oh, I thought through the list that I generated. That can be helpful, not to over program it, but just to be a little bit more intentional because there is a universal principle about questions. If you ask a predictable, generic, unthoughtful question, you will often get a predictable, generic, unthoughtful answer. That's the bad news. But the good news, Eric, is if you ask a thoughtful, engaging, personal question, you will often get a thoughtful, engaging, personal answer. Ask and you shall receive.
Yeah. Right. So it's sort of you reap what you sow kind of a thing, right? Like what you're putting
Yeah.
out there is what you're going to get. So that's one of my questions for you about social situations. There were a few, at least one place where you were talking about asking a more interesting question, right? Like it's
Mhm.
not just how are you or how was your day, but something a little more meaningful. And I was trying to figure out, does this make me more charismatic or more awkward sometimes, like, and maybe your levels of questions is the answer to that. Like you got to understand the situation, but how would you answer that?
Yeah, it's a great question. Well, first of all, to remember is anything worth doing well is worth doing poorly. And
Amen.
so
Yeah.
sometimes when we start out, we're not very good and we haven't necessarily worked our questions muscles before. And that's not to be ashamed of. We live in a culture that doesn't value questions, so it hasn't been modeled well. But if we're convinced to say, I want to do better at this, I want to do this well, then we can start working our muscles. And so that's what I tell people, start with some practices, but don't feel like you should try 15 practices all at once. Just try one thing. It's kind of like when you go to the gym. You don't have to start with the 50-pound dumbbell. Just start with the 5-pounder, and then eventually you can work up to the 10 and the 15 and the 20. And so if it feels awkward, it might be awkward. Okay. I mean, if you're around somebody that you love, you can say, hey, listen, I'm trying to get better at questions.
Mm.
It may feel a little clunky, but I'm really trying to improve in this. Will you help me improve? And maybe it'll help you grow in your questions too. And so then it becomes a way where you invite other people into the process to help you, or to say, hey, I'm trying something new. I was challenged to be a better question asker. I'm tempted to ask you right now, what's up? How you doing? But is it okay if I just try out a question that may be a little bit more thoughtful with you? People are much more patient with you
Mm.
when they know that. And plus they go, sure. And they're often surprised by an engaging question themselves.
Yep.
And to say, okay, like, what question can you ask that maybe is a little bit more interesting than how are you? And then you challenge them. And then you can play a little game of tennis back and forth where you're hitting the ball over the net.
Boy, I love that. Yeah, you got me thinking about, as a coach, sometimes permission is really, really powerful, right? To just say, "Can I ask you that question, or can I ask you about this thing?"
Yes.
And it's just cracking the door a little bit is the way to think about it. And then if somebody says yes, okay, then they're willing to go there. And then if they don't, then you can go, okay, great, that's fine, we can go, we can move on, that's okay.
Yep.
But
Yep.
that little bit of permission, it would be good. I wish I'd have known this at the grocery store in like Bannockburn, Illinois in college, because I was from Iowa. We talked to everybody, but then I would go there and I'd be like talking to people and I'm asking them questions, and it was not the right place, right? They didn't. That's
Yeah.
not a thing they
Yeah.
did, and I figured out, oh, and at the time I didn't understand. I was like, oh, this must be something wrong with me. Maybe I shouldn't do that. But it was just the context, not me. There we
Sure.
go.
Right. And there's that geographical difference that we were talking
100%.
about earlier. And that's the wisdom we need to say, oh,
Yeah,
maybe this person
that's it.
doesn't want to be asked a question right now. I mentioned this story in the book that I was waiting for a flight at, and I was sitting at my gate. Noticed a guy reading a book, and just said, "Oh, what are you reading?" And engaged in conversation. I love questions, so I'm jumping right in and asking him questions. And after a while, he looks at me and he says, "Are you a reporter?" And I was like, "No, I just like asking questions." And he said, "I kind of would like to get back to reading my book if that's okay." And what I realized at the moment was, oh, I wasn't picking my excitement to ask questions overrode my ability to pick up on signals of the guy going, you know what? I'm not really interested in talking to a stranger right now. And so we
Yeah,
need that wisdom and that awareness to be able to sense I may want to ask it. Do they want to be asked a question?
right.
That's another question we could ask before we open our mouths, is asking ourselves, is now the right time? Do they want to be asked?
100%. Wow, that's so good. Okay, I had one other question, one practical question. Then we're gonna do something fun, guys. We're gonna flip the script on the podcast, and I'm gonna give Jr. the opportunity to ask me some questions. But I have one more kind of practical question that I wanted to ask you about open versus closed questions, because we hear that a lot,
Hmm.
where closed questions. I think that they've got their place, right? They can sometimes give you something very specific if that's what you're looking for. They each have
Yep.
their moment. But so should we steer away from closed questions, or can we learn to like use them better, or how do you think about those things?
So much of this is context specific. There certainly are times. Some people say never ask a closed question. I'm like, no, you should. Like what time does the performance start tonight? Like, I don't need a long-winded answer. Just tell me
Right.
7:30.
Yeah.
Right? But there are certain relationships where I play a game with myself to say, can I ask a question where it's impossible for them to answer with just one word? So, what do we do when our middle school kid jumps in the car after school? How was your day at school? Fine, good, or
Yeah.
ugh. We just get a grunt, right? So when my youngest jumped in the car uh, from middle school, I'm thinking, how can I ask a question where it's impossible for him to say a one word answer? So I would say things like, "So I'm curious, what was the most interesting thing that you learned in school today?" Or what was the most interesting thing that happened with your friends? Now, of course, they could say nothing, but
Right.
that means they're really copping out. They're really, but they might say, well, Mrs. Jenkins had us do a science project outside. Oh, really? What'd you do? Then all of a sudden I have a conversation rather than like, how was school today? Good. Did you like your lunch? Yeah. And so I'm forcing myself to say, how can I, in this particular context, when I want to connect with someone, what is it that I can ask that would be impossible for a one word answer? So sometimes I want a one word answer, but for me to connect with someone, I want to go deeper. So think about the aperture. Am I wanting a microscope type question, like really zone in on something, or do I want a wide angled lens, a fisheye lens where I open up the aperture to say they could take it any direction they
Mm.
want? I'm just putting the ball on the tee. I'm letting them smack it around the ball field. But of saying, you want to take it trivial? Great. You want to take it serious? You want to take it spiritual? You want to take it relational? Go for it.
Yeah.
And so my son could tell me what's the most interesting thing of your day at school? He could tell me, oh, a fight broke out and we were scared to death and I was on the verge of tears. Or we learned something cool in science class. Or Johnny told the most hilarious joke and we snorted, milk out of our nose for 15 minutes. But I'm letting him decide. And
Right.
it's a choose your own adventure novel in a sense. I'm letting him choose the adventure.
I love that. Okay, you reminded me. You unlocked a memory for me. I used to ask people all the time, "What do you think?" And it would just be like randomly. And so sometimes people would be like, "What do you mean? About what?" Right? I'm like,
Yeah.
"It's open ended. You tell me. What do you want?" And so sometimes I think I nerved some people, but the spirit in it was, I'm just trying to find out what's on your mind, what's going on,
Yeah.
what's
Yeah.
happening in there that I don't know, that I can't see.
Yeah.
So maybe I need to refine that question and bring it back. We'll see. But
Yeah, and
that's
that
good.
may be an aperture that's so big that some people love and some people it freaks them out. They may need a
Totally.
little bit more of a scope. One of the sort of open-ended questions like this that my dad asked, and I love it. I've stolen it from him. It's not plagiarism. I'm giving him credit here, I guess, on the air.
That's good.
But I said he said, so today, are you winning or losing? And people
Oh,
go, well,
nice.
by what metric? And he goes, you tell me.
Yeah,
And I
there you
just
go.
love that because it's basically saying, how are you going through and assessing today? What
Yeah.
is your metric by which you find a fulfilling day? Which he could ask, what is your metric for a fulfilling day? But he says, today, you winning or losing? I have found that to lead to some fascinating
Wow.
questions about how people evaluate if their life is successful or not and how they define it. Because how you define success will define you, and how you define failure will also define you. So it just becomes a fascinating question. So, speaking of that, Eric, can I ask you a few questions?
Yes, you can. Okay, friends, we're gonna do this.
Sure.
I want to just tie a little bow on that real quick, because friends, I hope that you've heard this conversation so far and just said, I can ask better questions and there's things that I can do. And what if the most fascinating people in the world are the ones that are right around me and I'm not even talking to them, right? They are there. That's one thing I hope that you get from this conversation. Okay, Jer, I'm gonna turn it over to you. You go for it. Ask me some questions.
Yeah, great. Well, first of all, I'm a baseball fan. I got my baseball hat on
Yes.
here. Behind your head, you've got four baseballs. I'm curious. It sounds like you're a baseball fan. Why are those four baseballs behind your head? What does that symbolize? And what is the story? What are the stories behind them?
Oh, what a great question. Thank you. Okay. I should have known you'd ask me a good one. Okay. So those are a collection of baseballs that I've kind of collected over my life. I do love baseball. I'm a St. Louis Cardinals fan. I grew up in Des Moines, Iowa. So we had the Iowa Cubs. Now I could have been a Cubs fan. That would have been a miserable life, but praise God. My grandfather was a St. Louis Cardinals fan. So I didn't have that misfortune, but I remember we would go down every summer, right down to Sec Taylor Stadium. They don't call it that anymore, but and we would watch, especially when the Memphis Redbirds would come through, and we would watch all kinds of people play. Well, so one of those baseballs I got as a kid at the ballpark, and I got it signed by a guy named Doug DeCenzo. Do you remember him?
Mhm.
He ended up
Sure,
playing for the
sure.
Cubs. He had a pretty solid career. I don't think he played for the Cubs, and then he went someplace else, and I don't remember. I also saw Todd Zeal play there when he's still playing catcher in the minor leagues,
Yeah.
and he ended up having a very long career, which is really cool. Okay, the other one that's of any note. Well, I guess there's one of them is like a fake signed ball from like the 1986
Mhm.
Cardinals or something like that,
Mhm.
which is cool. I like that, and I got it at Busch Stadium when I was a little kid and visited. But the one I really love is I got a baseball that I purchased at a little shop here in town, a souvenir or it's like a memorabilia shop, right? So you can find all kinds of crazy stuff. It's a baseball signed by Red Schoendienst, who at the time he was the oldest Hall of Famer alive when I bought it, and then he passed a couple years after that. But classic Cardinal, right? Like really, and his numbers retired and all that. So anyway, it was pretty cool. So I just love baseball. My dad and I actually had seen from about I want to say 2000. We moved here in 2004. So about 2006, we didn't do it the first year, but from 2006 to 2019, we saw every inning of Cardinals baseball played in Colorado, and we
Wow.
would go to
Very
every
cool.
game because I used to live in Chicago, and we would go see every series. We'd check out a game, and then when we moved here, they only come once a year. So I was like, Dad, we have to go to all the games, and I probably drag him and ruined his budget for whatever, But we had a great time. So yeah, I love baseball.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So speaking of material possessions, your house is on fire and you have a chance to run in and grab one object. What's the object and why?
Okay, excluding my dog, right, or my or people living things, I would
Yeah, not
say,
pets or people, but object.
yeah, yeah. I have a early 1970s Gibson Hummingbird, which is irreplaceable. It is a
Okay.
beautiful guitar. I don't play much anymore. Kind of lost that when I went to seminary, and so then I was like busy and I was working, and I didn't really play as much, and life kind of happened, but I still love it. It hangs on the wall, and it's just a beautiful instrument.
That's great. So I'm curious, Eric, we talked about success earlier. How do you define success?
That's a good question. Most of the time, what I think I define success is probably is, am I making money? Like, is that
Mm,
would be one way. Even though I know, and I think I feel deep down that what I really believe is that success is having um, just meaningful conversations that change people, that change their perspective. It's one of the things I want to do with this show
mm,
is, and I might even rename it. We'll see. But I want people to see that being a human being is a really beautiful thing. And
mm,
if I can
mm.
do that, help through a conversation like just like this one, being curious around about the people around you, is beautiful. But I've kind of tried to do that really wherever I am, and I would much prefer. Like, I pursued ministry for a while. A lot of the stuff I just don't want to do. Right? If I was actually working
Mm.
at a church, I would that wouldn't be good for me. But the relational pieces and the, like, when you actually get to be there for some of the most important moments in people's lives, that's great.
Love it. When do you feel most misunderstood by people?
Uh, oh, that's a great question. Which is my favorite thing to hear, by the way, from people on the show. Like, if I ask somebody that and they go, "Oh yeah," then I know they're stalling, like I am right now. I think when I'm pretty, I'm ambitious, but not in a way like we might say like a billionaire is ambitious, right? I have a lot of vision and a lot of because I believe God made us really, really powerfully, right? And I think it's a travesty that we sometimes allow ourselves to get um, hung up on details, hung up on things that maybe, like, sometimes things like budgets matter. I get it, but sometimes what if it didn't? What if we could do some other things? What if we could find money? People got money. I worked at a bank. I know people got money. It's out there. What if we took off the restrictions and we let some things breathe and we go after it? So when I feel that way, uh, there are ways that I feel misunderstood because people
Mm.
think, oh, that's just pie in the sky and nobody's gonna do that, or whatever. And I think we can bring a lot more good into the world.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Thanks for sharing. What is your dream with podcasting and videos? I know you said you want people to have
Mm,
connections, but what's your big, hairy, audacious goal dream? Your BHAG, as they say, when it comes to this. It just blow your mind, your wildest dreams when it comes to what you're doing here with the podcast and the video.
yeah. Well, I saw last year the way that podcasting changed the political landscape.
Mm,
And I thought
mm,
that was very fascinating because I think that's
mm,
a
mm,
picture. It doesn't even have to be political. I want to interview people in office. I think that'd be really fun and interesting. But that was fascinating for me because it's the first time that this medium has really had a significant cultural uh, result. So I was
mm,
pretty fascinated by that. I would love to become one of the people that gets to be part of those conversations. That is a
mm,
must go on when people have a book out, when people have like the we can call them A-list or whatever it is, right?
Hmm.
That they go, okay, we got to do Nevin's show because he's got an audience and people want to listen. I would love to become a person who, when people think about the word what's good in the world, they think about some of the stuff that I've been able to do. I
Great. And
would
this
like
may
that to,
roll into,
yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say I would like that to translate to some financial success as well. And I've got a
Hmm.
financial goal that I'd like
Hmm.
that I have actually on my background. And I'm like, that's where I want to go because these um, people, because like some of these networks, they're giving out big deals, right? And I
Hmm.
think, so I'm a little afraid to say this, but I do think I've got enough talent to get there, but I have to work hard
Mm,
to get there.
that's good. This may roll into what you just shared, and if so, that's great. But think about you retire, you have a big retirement party. What do you want people to line up and shake your hands and thank you for with tears in their eyes?
Mm. I have one coworker from when I worked at the bank who said to me that I was the only person who was ever able to explain the Bible to her in a way she could understand. That was
Mm,
amazing. That was amazing.
mm, mm,
Um, so whether it's something like that or not, if it's just I made your life more interesting because I asked you,
mm.
uh, or had some interesting conversations, I'd be fine with that. But for a lot of times, I worked there when I was in school, so I was thinking a lot about all these things, right? So I was bringing it up.
Yeah, that's great. What last question. I'm curious, if I had a room full of your friends here and you weren't in it, but I were to say, all right, describe Eric to me in three or four adjectives, what do you think they would say?
Probably enthusiastic would be one, and that's one that I often use of myself. Um, Witty. I often have a comeback or something. It depends on the friend group. Sometimes I have to be careful because I can throw some things out there. Um, I don't know if creative, if they would say creative, but they might say something like that. I really love experiences. So during COVID, I became the neighborhood bartender, and so I would
Hmm.
mix a cocktail. We do barbecues, so maybe hospitable would
Hmm.
be the other one. My friend Sue, she's got a question. We're gonna put this up here in a second. Um,
Sure.
but she, but we have these huge barbecues. We've been known to have 70 people in our backyard after I filled up my smoker for a day, right, and just smoked a ton of food and shared. But we do that because we believe that this is that we get to fill our lives with people. That's what matters. And if we can have people around our table share some food, I think that's a picture of the feast of the lamb coming, right? Someday. Well, let's start today because I think it's. I'm pretty sure there's going to be ribs there, even though they don't eat pork. It's okay.
I love it. Eric, thanks for letting me
Yeah.
turn the tables on you and ask you some
Thank
questions.
you.
And yeah, I learned a lot, and I hope your listeners learned a lot about you. And fascinating.
Uh,
Thank you for allowing me to ask those.
well, thanks for doing that. That was I feel very seen and vulnerable. All right, let me see because we had one of my people had some questions. So let's do this real quick, and then
Sure.
I'll let you go. I don't want to keep you too long, but let me just take a look. Let's see. Oh, okay. So Sue asked a question. How do you know you're changing people through your asking questions and your podcasting? That's a good one.
Mm.
What do you think?
No. One of the things that a game I like to play with myself that I don't tell others when I'm in a conversation that I'm playing it is to, and you referenced this already, when someone says, "Wow, that's a really good question," or "I've never been asked that before," or when people say, "Thank you for asking that," or "Thank you for caring for me by just asking good questions." That to me is one of the most meaningful compliments that I can receive. Or someone says, "Man, you asked me a question 3 weeks ago, and I haven't stopped thinking about it."
Oh, that's
Um,
great.
to me, those are when I know that we're making an impact in people's lives. One other thing, and I'll make it real quick, but um, neuroscientists, when they study the brain, when an answer is given, the brain lights up a little bit, But when a question is asked and they scan the brain, it lights up like fireworks. And what they say is that it's so important that, and it's so effective that you can actually hijack someone's brain. That's the phrase that researchers use, that your brain is hijacked when someone asks you a question. So, just as an example, if I were to ask, what color are the shoes you're wearing right now? You can't help it. Like you just thought,
Yeah.
what am I wearing today? Some of you may have looked down at your shoes. And so that I think is really important to remember, that if we ask the right question at the right time for the right motive to the right person, it's often an impactful question because we just hijacked temporarily someone's brain. That's
Yes.
effective. And that's why we have to wield that power very carefully.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so powerful and beautiful to be able to do that, right? It's one of the reasons I ask questions online. Sometimes I'll just ask, or I'll just say something as simple as "God is love," right, on
Mhm,
Facebook, because it just, people have to think about it once you see it. Oh, that's
mhm.
what's the other thing I forgot earlier. One of my mentors says your brain has to answer every question you ask it, right? Which,
Yeah, yeah.
and so that gets powerful. All right, I'm gonna do this and then we'll say goodbye. So Sue actually said she answered your question, and she said, Eric, kind, non-judgmental, willing to take risks. This is Eric. Okay, yeah, there we
Oh,
go.
that
So
what a gift. What
we
a
we,
gift. That's so kind.
we have a friend in here answered the question that you asked. So I love it. Jared, this has been delightful. Just thank you so much
Uh,
for spending some time with me, and I appreciate it. We've got up here, friends. The book is called "The Art of Asking Better Questions," and it's great. You got to pick it up if you want to learn more about those four. Was it 4 or 5 levels of questions? Right,
Four levels. Yep.
four
Hmm.
levels of questions. You want to know
Hmm.
more about that, you can get that in the book, and there's so much more in there. You're gonna love it. It's Kairos, you said kairospartnerships.org. For, if you're a leader, you should definitely check them out, but you can pre-order the book there as well. So go there. It comes out in a week, right? October 7th. So should be good. Jared, I'm gonna just give you the last word. Is there anything that you want to leave us with?
Well, I'll just say thanks for having me on, Eric. It's great. I can tell that you have a passion for questions, and I would say for asking great questions has the power and the potential to improve the quality of every single area of our lives. Your relationships, your career, your faith, your finances, your future. It can have a significant impact on everything. In fact, I'd end with this. There's not a single area where improving the quality of the questions that we ask doesn't improve the quality of our life and the lives around us. And so I would say tap into that potential and that power of questions, because it's one of the best ways we can connect with God, with ourselves, and with other people. It's an amazingly powerful tool. And it's free, it's accessible, and it's right there for us if we want to lean into it.
Man, think of questions as a skill. That is incredible. You don't even have to be a podcaster to use it. I love it. Jared, thanks
Mhm.
so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.